Welcome to the Parent You podcast, where we want to frame the challenges of the teenage years for parents to see these years as a great work of sanctification in their lives and have a deeper understanding of each other and most importantly, grow together in the grace of Jesus Christ. I'm Mark Long, and 5 years ago, I approached the leadership at Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama, about a calling to pursue the hearts of parents and families with teenagers and to equip them to be proactive rather than reactive in their parenting. Living with teenagers. Are you stressing out about some of your interactions with them? Do you ever feel like you can't get a handle on things? You're jumping from one situation to another with them. We wonder if the strategies that we utilize in rearing our teenagers are helpful for them in the long term. One thing that I've found that is very helpful is to establish clear boundaries with our teenagers. They really can help us alleviate some of the stress that we're feeling and also that the teenager is feeling. But it takes a willingness to stand strong, some soul searching, and a lot of confidence. Today we're joined by Rachel Gunn, founder of Seeds of Impact. Rachel, thank you for joining us this morning. We're so glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Seeds of Impact?
Yeah, Seeds of Impact is a nonprofit that I founded a couple of years ago, and we focus on helping parents understand really healthy parenting. A lot of it is breaking those generational parenting habits, and a lot of it is bringing tools and resources to parents that that may not have them. We work a lot in under-resourced communities, but honestly, we work with all parents. One thing I've learned is that parenting is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter, your status, your culture. It's we all struggle, and we all feel like we're failing at times. So what we try to do is really educate, but also empower parents to, like you said, parent with confidence. So that's our goal.
Looking over some of the material that you've written, came across 4 basic foundations. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So the 4 foundations that we talk about in parenting, the first one is impact versus impulse parenting, and that's kind of the really foundation of what I teach. Impulse parenting is pretty self-explanatory. We're putting out fires all day, and a lot of us find ourselves in that position. And even the most intentional of us, I have days and seasons like that where I just feel like I'm trying to survive. But ultimately, impact parenting is really parenting for the future. It is understanding that what we're doing today is going to have an impact on our children's future, and it's taking advantage of that, using that to make sure that that impact is positive, to make sure that we are having a positive impact on on our children's sense of responsibility, on their relationship with Christ, on their moral compass, all of those things. Impact parenting is really understanding that we are parenting by laying a foundation when they're younger. And then when they get older, we're really dependent on our influence with them. And that's where that impact comes in. That's where, knowing that the foundation we've laid, establishing our authority, the trust and relationship that we've built with them, that is going to come to fruition really when they're teenagers, when they're in our own home. And all of that, hopefully we're building an influence with our children.
Talk to us about realistic expectations.
So realistic expectations, there was a TED Talk that explained about parenting happiness and how it was dipped down. Happiness dipped down when people became parents, and it had a lot to do with expectations. And they gave an analogy, which I kind of tweaked to work for us. So the analogy is that, as parents, we start out with social media, especially, thinking we're taking a trip to a rainforest, which is a very beautiful place, but also a very trying place. I mean, it takes some effort to walk through a rainforest. You have to be prepared. So we're seeing this, preparing for this trip through the rainforest with its challenges, but overall, it's beautiful. But we get off the plane and we're at the base of Mount Everest. Sorely underprepared because it's definitely much more challenging. And I think that's where our expectations come into play. We expect one thing, but parenting is so much different than what we've really expected. And a lot of us end up really feeling defeated before we even get started because we just expected something so different. And we're standing there thinking we're just ill-equipped, we're underprepared, we have no idea what we don't even have an idea about. We're just really confused. And so expectations, honestly, there's a expectation gap. And I think as parents, honestly, before you're a parent, you really have nothing in your brain to compare parenting to. So people can tell you how hard it is, but you never really have a full understanding until you're knee deep in it. So as long as we can understand that there is an expectation gap, I think it can help us really to navigate that difficulty at that level that we just never were prepared for. Just knowing that we weren't prepared for this, but that's okay. We're going to survive it.
Rachel, can you talk to us about boundaries, healthy boundaries that parents can develop and what they look like or what they shouldn't look like?
Yeah. So boundaries are really important in parenting. And one of the things that I've found over the years is that we oftentimes don't start establishing boundaries until later in our parenting, but it's really important that they're established early on when they're toddlers. The problem with that is that they're really cute, and they're really cute when they're bad too, so that makes it difficult. But if we can establish boundaries early, and it's basically establishing our authority. In parenting, the parent-child relationship, the dynamic there is different from a lot of relationships. And we are not friends, but it's not a dictatorship like our parents might have led us to believe. But there is an imbalance of power. And as parents, we have to establish that the authority belongs to us. And a lot of times we find when we don't establish that early on in the toddler years, we're fighting for that power. And when we're fighting for that power, our entire parenting career, then it makes it hard to get into those other things that, that we're trying to establish with our children. So establishing boundaries early is really, really important. But boundaries for teenagers looks very different than boundaries for toddlers. And I think when we talk about teenagers, that's where a lot of times we get hung up. There's so many books, so many things out there telling us about how to parent our toddlers. But teenagers, we wake up one day and we're like, who is this in our house? And the way I like to describe it is, boundaries for toddlers, it's like a house. You have a lot of rooms with a lot of walls. So they run into a lot of walls. There's a lot of boundaries there. But when they are teenagers, the boundaries need to open up and it looks more like a backyard. We have a fence, that kind of keeps them in that backyard, but they have a wide open space to explore, to really transition into adulthood, to make decisions, to navigate their world. But those boundaries, while they're fewer, they're still very firm. They still need to know that we are the authority and that we're willing to stand there and say, no, this is a firm boundary. But at the same time, we've given them freedom to really navigate and learn how to navigate their world.
When it comes to moving from, rearing children to adolescence and then, on even further into the teenage years, we talk about how the boundaries will change, but how would you say you're to enforce those boundaries?
So we talk a lot about and teach a lot about principles versus focusing on the strategies. And the reason is, every family is different. Every family dynamic is different. And so I can give strategies. And an example, spending quality family time together, that's a principle. Eating dinner together as a family is a strategy. And if I teach that we have to eat dinner together as a family in order to have quality time together, then I've set a majority of my target audience up for failure, because they don't have that opportunity. But if I teach family time, if I teach intentional family time, and I help empower them to find that time within their schedule, find that time within their family dynamic to have that intentional time, then I'm setting them up for success. And the same thing with holding boundaries. Holding boundaries is a principle, but the strategies to do that might look different within every family and even within different children. I hold boundaries different with both of my own children because they're different kids, and what works for one, may not work for another. Holding boundaries with teenagers, it really is just about standing strong. If it's a boundary, teenagers are going to, they have a lot of logic and they have a lot of ability to argue their way out of anything, and they'll make up the logic if they need to. But when we can stand strong, then that's holding a boundary. One of the most important things that I teach, and I think, this is something where I myself had to work on this, is that anger really has no place in holding a boundary. And I think sometimes when, it's frustrating, especially with teenagers. We just dealt with this last night in our own home, holding a boundary with our teenager. And it was frustrating, but anger is never, ever a way to hold a boundary. And, that's something we really try to focus on is number one, just stand firm. If it's a boundary, it's a boundary. And, but number two, let's take the emotion out of it. Discipline, we talk about enforcing our rules. Honestly, with teenagers, discipline is going to be more about that influence. Yes, we are going to have to enforce rules, and it may be a logical consequence. One of the best ways, we may not realize this as parents, but we pay for pretty much everything they do. So if, one of the rules in our household is we're not going to provide you with these extra things if you can't respect us enough to follow these few rules that we have for you. So it doesn't have to be a lot of conversation. It doesn't have to be, a lot. We have a few boundaries for our teenagers, not a lot. But if they can't follow those, then there is no gas money. There is no phone, these things. And they know that. So I think a lot of it is doing what you say you're going to do. Being consistent, and you've got to start that, and it's 100% of the time, which is tough. But when you have fewer boundaries, it makes it easier.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, like I said before at the very beginning, I like your ministry because it really does aim at the heart. I do want to encourage parents to have goals and dreams and aspirations for their kids. But when it comes to actual rearing them, we have to rear them with such an open hand, knowing that they are given to us by God, and we're to be good stewards with them. And I think when it comes to being good stewards, as mom and dad, they have to be willing to say, Father, I want to yield to what you would have me do. And like you said just a few minutes ago, anger, a lot of times some of our parenting comes out, and it comes out in such negative ways. And we're not here to rebuke parents about that, but we are here to go, you're a sinner, just like your kid is. And when we're praying that God will work in their hearts. God's also, I really believe, saying, I'm going to work in your heart as well. Parent U is a ministry of Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church. I'm Pastor Mark Long, and thanks for listening.